Well, it has been, I guess, one way to describe it, a strange winter. And I kind of wanted to know what kind of an impact our winter conditions or lack thereof has had on the trapping community. No one better to answer that question than the president of the Alberta Trappers Association, Bill Abercrombie. Bill, thanks so much for taking some time today and chatting with us. So, right off the top, maybe give us an overview. What kind of season has it been?
Oh, well, thanks, Michael. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. It's, as you said, it's been a very different kind of winter for wildlife in the trapping community this year. Conditions varied a little bit, depending on what part of the province you're in. But um, I guess the overriding thing is the lack of moisture and the warm temperatures. And I know that a lot of people would think that that would be a good thing for wildlife, but it's not. Um, Reason being that without, even with mild temperatures below zero, uh, most of the prey species for predators in the province depend on that sub terrestrial layer under the snow to actually survive the cold temperatures. And at this point right now, because we had no snow literally till into January, and then we got a real cold snap. Um, yeah, it most of the mouse and vole population has literally crashed almost into nothing,
And of
and
course,
that's almost province wide. Yeah.
yeah, and it's just I mean, when the food starts to evaporate, that has a massive bearing on the food chain, right? All up.
We're seeing the effects of that now as well, um, particularly in coyotes, foxes, birds of prey that depend on those. You see a lot of them are in poor condition now. They're very, very hungry. I know with warm temperatures, it's interesting that the coyotes and foxes started breeding 6 weeks early this year. I and I still don't have a solid explanation about why that happened, but it did. Um, and uh, of course, the ice conditions in early season were very, very unstable. And now, of course, uh, all the um, uh, semi-aquatic fur bearers and wildlife that spend the winter under the ice are in very um, chaotic uh, state right now because the ice now is 2 to 3 feet thick. And we already had low water conditions from lack of participation. So the die off from muskrats, beavers, mink, otters, animals that spend a lot of time under the ice in the winter and hunt and live in those conditions is going to be really, yeah, pretty significant unless we get an early spring and a lot of precipitation. So, yeah.
You mentioned coyotes. I know folks are watching this and they're seeing you sitting in a truck. You're actually on site of a coyote issue. It seems like every year, Bill, that we talk about there's a story about coyotes causing issues. Um,
Yeah.
do you see any indication that this might be a different year?
It's a different year in that the increased competition for food now with the urban coyote population, which is quite high at this time, and the transition area around urban centers, I would set it probably overpopulated with coyotes, just from the um, pressure of rural coyotes being pushed into urban centers. And so, yeah, the coyotes in urban areas like Edmonton and Calgary continue to evolve and find ways to exploit, human resources or human food supplies, and human life itself in terms of people and their pets and that sort of thing. And this year they do seem to be more aggressive and much more territorial. I think there's more competition. I also think that the coyotes now, they're not really just in pairs, they're in kind of extended family groups with a large number of coyotes that would control two or three different residential communities, in the adjacent natural areas and that. And so, that's a more efficient way for them to hunt together, covering a much bigger area, but it also puts them in conflict with the next extended family group next to them. And I am seeing a lot of evidence of that. It just seems like the aggression level and the tension between coyotes themselves is higher this year. And of course, that kind of what happens in rural areas too, but now it's being played out in residential areas and urban centers, which is not the best thing. So we have a lot of issues this year. We've had to address a lot of aggressive coyote problems and a lot more aggressive behavior with pets and predatory attacks on domestic pets. And yeah, so that's just kind of symptomatic, I think, of the stress level with the climate, but also the stress level with the number of coyotes now and kind of how they're set up demographically, tends to put them in more of a conflict situation with each other.
Do you feel it's reached a point, Bill, where more action or more information, I guess, needs to be coming from various municipalities to residents that perhaps live on those the edge of green spaces and that type of thing?
Well, I think actually the municipalities are doing a pretty good job of it. Um, People get it. Like if you're in areas where I mean, literally, it's not just green spaces. There are breeding populations of coyotes in every part of Edmonton and Calgary, and the smaller uh, communities around those areas, smaller cities and towns. They're there and they're proliferated throughout the entire area, residential communities, commercial areas, industrial areas. And so um, people understand that. I think one of the things that we look at, the policy with most communities is coexistence, but with a very hard line on what is acceptable behavior from coyotes and what is not. And actually, most have bought into that. And so, you know, people are seeing a lot of coyotes, but we're doing actually a fairly good job of staying on top of the coyotes that are high risk to public safety, high risk, either through poor health or disease or, parasitic infestation, but from behavior. And and we're pretty much on top of that. The only thing is that it is almost a 24/7 job, and you cannot let up at all. And the cities have kind of bought into this, and they have pretty good systems set up to investigate, monitor, haze coyotes, push back on their aggressive behaviors, so they're more respectful around people. But right now, coyotes that are deemed to be a threat to public safety, or are focused in on depredation on pets and that sort of thing, and targeting people and their dogs and all that, we just remove them. They go, and the other coyotes, so long as they stay within allowable parameters of behavior, they're okay. And I think that provides a better social license from an urban community, because sometimes this is tricky stuff, trying to work out the optics and convince people that what we're doing is the right way to manage them. But I mean, we've had about 10 years now of the coyotes having high populations, and a lot of interaction with coyotes. We don't really have to work that hard anymore for people to understand that it's important to stay on top of this. So otherwise, there would be a lot more attacks on people, a lot more high risk behavior, a lot more anarchy, and in coyotes acting out in residential areas. And, generally we're on top of that. So I think the public kind of understands the situation, realizes that, when you allow animals to cohabitate with people, that you actually have to take responsibility for them as well. So, that's kind of the messaging that's provided by municipalities, and overall they do a pretty good job at it, of of engaging with people and getting that message out.
Looking at the larger trapping community in Alberta, Bill, what's happening in terms of legislation? Of course, trapping in the province is something that is controlled. You have to have the proper licensing, an active trap line, that type of thing. What's happening from a legislative perspective in terms of where we're at in the number of animals that can be harvested over a given season?
Well, that's kind of in transition, and we're looking at that. The government here, I mean, they recognize the need for having trappers on the landscape. They also recognize sort of the cultural, historic tradition and the benefit of having a vibrant trapping community like we have in Alberta. Um, because it's part of Alberta's history, and it speaks to the roots of a lot of what make Alberta what it is. In terms of changes in legislation and all that, I think they're coming. It's it's a tricky process, but I think what the government has seen as one of the best options for them is that empowering trappers as much as possible. Um, uh, Using data collected by trappers is their best source of scientific information to make good decisions about managing fur bearers and wildlife as well, because the trappers provide a lot of data outside of just fur bearers, but the ecosystem, habitat, ungulate populations, all of those things. And they are coming around to that. And I think in the near future, we're going to see a different model for management in Alberta, much more about enabling and supporting trappers to be on the landscape as much as possible, and to source that data and make it available not just for government, but also for researchers and industry and education and everything else. So we have a really solid base of information in order to make management decisions. And I think that's what the trapping community wants. That's what they really are, fired up to contribute to that. And I think that government and the rest of the stakeholders in Alberta are really looking forward to having that. Because right now what we we have good regulatory framework, but we're not getting the information out of that framework that we need to manage properly. And so I think implementing just a few changes will make a big difference. And it is good we have support for that at the political level, and we also have support from our civil servants in the ministries. So those are exciting things moving forward. Even with fluctuating fur prices and that sort of thing, I think both trappers and government are seeing additional roles that are as important as commercial harvest, and that is the monitoring of fur bear populations and the state of the habitat. Because trappers, in many cases are on the landscape all year round, not just during trapping season. So we need to try and take advantage of that. It's also a good way. We're having very good engagement with Indigenous communities. They also see opportunities here, and so it's a good way for us to be able to work together on common goals, and that's a good thing too.
All right. Well, obviously, I sense a follow-up interview with you in the near future, Bill, as that legislation gets
we're
worked through.
we're in flux a little bit here, but it's once it's implemented, we want to get it right the first time. So we're working on it, and I'm confident that that'll happen.
All right. We will leave it there, sir, and I'll let you get back to doing what you do best, and that's keeping literally our neighborhood safe from coyotes. So we'll let you get back at it. Bill, thanks so much for your time today.
Anytime, Michael.